an audio of it. So,
All right.
like you have all these different.
Yeah, all the woods are rated on a Janka hardness scale and the specific gravity. All woods. There's a wood database you can go through and find all this information.
Janka.
Janka, Janka. It's the Janka hardness, and what the Janka hardness is, it's how much pressure it takes to push a steel ball. It's like a 1/4-inch steel ball in halfway submerged into this wood. So they press it in there, and how many pounds it takes to push into this wood. That's how they measure the hardness of each type of wood. So as you go through the scale, the Janka hardness scale, you have hardnesses of woods that create different pitches and tones and things like that. And then inherently there's the specific gravity, how dense the wood is. The density of the wood has a lot to do with tone as well. So you could have a very heavy, a heavy and hard wood, and that will absorb a lot of sound. So you have to then kind of thin that striker down a little bit more so than a very light and like a cedar that has no density, no hardness to it whatsoever. So you have to leave that a little bit thick. And then what I have done to the cedars is I do what I call a heavy cedar. And I've sunk almost a 2-inch brass rod down into the handle of this thing to give it weight, so it has a little bit of a heft as opposed to being light and airy. So that changed cedar for me totally. That's my little secret thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do that. I do what they call I call a heavy cedar, and then I do a heavy hickory as well, where I get hickory, which is relatively light in density but pretty hard for a domestic wood or whatever. But it gives it that weight, so you have better feel in the striker. You can kind of feel what's going on in the top. And when you have something like super, super heavy and hard like Macassar ebony, this is obviously a lot thinner than those just because it's so heavy, and you have to thin it down or else you don't get any sound out of it. It won't vibrate. So what the striker is doing is vibrating. It's a little, this whole thing is a little musical instrument.
So is more of the sound coming from the pot or the striker?
Both.
Both. Yeah.
Yeah, hand in hand. So you can have one slate call, and you can run 2-3 different strikers on it and get 2-3 different sounds, totally different sounds, pitches and tones and things like that. That could maybe, when you call all day to a turkey and he doesn't respond, and then you change striker and you hit a different pitch and he hits, something happens to him and he likes the way that girl sounds, and then he goes, "Hey, who's that?" So that's what the whole love affair with strikers and pots and materials and and even like things like soundboards, like here I have a red slate, which is harder than a gray slate, but it has a copper soundboard in there. So that copper gives it a little bit of a hollowy metallic sound. Even the glass over copper just gives it a different sound that they're not used to, or hits a pitch that they're not used to, and it's a more natural kind of a husky sound as opposed to going glass over glass or glass over slate, which everybody does. Mm-hmm. So that's where John has kind of innovated, these different techniques of putting soundboards and surfaces together, and it's just a myriad of options of tones that you can get out of a call. And even woods, I mean, you can make the same call in a different wood. You could have a glass, this is Bolivian rosewood, but you could put the same combination in something like a Bastonia walnut or in a Claro walnut, and these two are totally different woods. Or if you do something in a super, super heavy, like Cocobolo or something like that, to where that thing's eating up a lot of the sound. It's absorbing a lot of the sound, so you can get different sounds out of everything, just by switching woods and surfaces and things like that. So on the scale, So what I have for the strikers, I have everything from, the lightest possible is cedar, and then probably it goes into canary wood, which is about 1,500 on the Janka hardness scale. Cedar is about 600 on the Janka hardness scale. And then we can go all the way up that scale to African blackwood, which is the hardest I have, which is 3,600 on the Janka hardness scale. So, and most of rosewoods and things like that, what they call tone woods, these are what they're building, like high-end guitars and musical instruments, clarinets and things like that. Those are, things like, that's granadillo. They'll make them a lot out of hormigo, which is right there. No, that's Cadillacs. Sorry, I messed you up. There. That's hormigo, or orange agate, they call it. So when they're building, super high-end musical instruments, they're not making it out of a piece of hickory most of the time. They're going with a rosewood that they in a wood that they call tone wood, that actually has tone to it, like Cadillacs. This is Cadillacs, which is a very hard, heavy wood, but it has that tonality to it, to where it kind of rings. And actually, it's a pretty amazing, because you can hear certain ones will have a different sound on the lathe when you're turning it. They actually kind of ring, which is, that to me is kind of
neat. So tell me about, what do these sell for? What are you? These are custom made. Everyone handmade.
Yeah, they're all handmade. The cheapest I have is the cedar and the hickory. That start at 25. Actually, yellow heart, purple heart, I'd sell for 20. Those are just common everyday. Everybody has a purple heart and a yellow heart. It seems like, if they're going to go to a somewhat exotic. The cedar and hickory are 25, and then it goes up kind of gradually in the scale from there, basically on what's available and what I can get. So things like Cadillacs. This is a highly figured Cadillacs. I had to pay a lot more for the board, so I charged 28 for that. We have things like pink ivory. This is ultra rare. Pink ivory is ultra rare, ultra expensive. Those are 45. Tulip wood, which I don't get a lot of, that's very rare, and that's like everybody's favorite go-to striker. Everybody loves the tulip wood. It's very hard to find. I've had one board of it that I like this year, that I made a handful of strikers, but everything else now, the boards are, just not in great shape. So you have to pay a few $100 for a board, and you might get 4 strikers out of it. So yeah. Somebody's got to pay for that, and people. So I don't get it that often, just because it's not, I don't think, personally, I wouldn't spend $40 on a tulip wood. I'd rather buy a granadillo or a hormigo at $28 than $40, and I think those are better woods. And guys aren't making, you don't see a lot of custom guys making stuff out of granadillo and hormigo. I just don't. Another one that I've never seen anybody make a striker out of is red gum. And I've sold a lot of these to guys. I couldn't sell them at first. I had to give them away because they wouldn't buy it because they never heard of it.
Yeah.
So I gave a couple away to guys that I knew, were pretty serious about calls and strikers, and now they're believers. And they're back for buying more and spares and things like that. But a red gum is a great wood. It has a great density, great hardness. It's right in the middle of the hardness scale at like 2,500. And it's nobody has ever made a striker out of it.
Is that your logo, or is that?
Yeah, that's my signature.
Oh, your signature. Okay.
Yeah, I sign it.
All right. Fantastic. Signed. Cool. Okay. How about the tips? What do you do to the tips? Anything?
The tips, yeah. So when they're like this, when I finish them and sand them and do all that on the lathe, obviously they've been in the lathe, so that's holding it. So then I have to go to the bandsaw and cut each end off, and then it's got to get shaped. So I put that on the little belt sander and smooth it out, and then the tip itself has got to be hand shaped or whatever. So what I do is I have, I put it on a palm sander, and then just basically hand shape every tip and try to get it perfectly round. So what you end up with is a perfect round or kind of like a parabolic type tip on it, to where it makes it easier to play. And then once that's done and sanded, then you condition it with the red. I like the red Scotch-Brite, and that just kind of cleans it like that. And that's how you clean it when you're playing it or whatever as well. If you're out hunting in the woods, you should always have one of these little guys with you, just to kind of keep it clean, to when it fouls up. So if it ever fouls up with, the slate material or glass material, you can just kind of spin it on there or swipe it on it to clean it off, and that'll keep it gripping.
Okay. Wow.
What do you think?
There's a lot I didn't know.